In a world demanding your constant attention,
Reclaiming your mind and your body is the ultimate act of rebellion.
welcome back to Wholistic Wednesdays. I'm Amy.
And I'm Shelly.
Whether you're walking your dog, commuting to work, folding laundry, or hiding in your pantry for 5 minutes of peace,
Which honestly, sometimes that's self-care.
it really is. We're so glad you're spending part of your day with us. Can I ask you something that's been on my mind?
Always.
Have you ever had your body tell you something before your brain figured it out?
Ooh, absolutely. More times than I can count.
Me too. And what's funny is that I usually ignore it the first 10 times. I'll get a tension headache, tight shoulders. I'll stop sleeping well. I'll be snapping at people over things that normally wouldn't bother me. And instead of asking, what is my body trying to tell me? I start troubleshooting. I need more tea. Maybe I reorganize my calendar. Maybe I just need to push through.
Or maybe you just need to eat. Right? We become detectives trying to solve those symptoms instead of getting curious about that message.
Exactly. And I don't know where we learned that. Somewhere along the way, we decided that our bodies were inconvenient. Like they're interrupting our plans instead of trying to help us.
I think that's especially true for women. We are praised for pushing through, going to work sick, taking care of everyone else first, running on 4 hours of sleep. We wear exhaustion like it's some kind of an achievement badge.
It's almost become a badge of honor.
Yep.
Okay, I'm so busy. I haven't sat down all day. I haven't had lunch yet. And everybody nods like, wow, you're really doing it. Instead of saying, hey, are you okay?
Exactly. We've normalized functioning while depleted. And eventually the body says, if you're not going to slow down involuntarily, I'm going to make you.
That reminds me of something that happened a couple of months ago. I had one of those weeks where everything looked fine on paper. Clients were booked, the business was moving, nothing dramatic had happened. But every morning I woke up, I was already tired, not just sleepy, I was heavy. Do you know what I mean?
I do. There's this huge difference. Sometimes it's not about needing another hour of sleep. It's like your whole system is carrying more than it has capacity for.
Exactly. And because nothing was wrong, I just kept ignoring it. I kept thinking, I'll feel better after this week, I guess. Then the next week came and it was the same thing. And finally, one morning, I just sat outside with my tea and my wiener dogs. And I asked myself, what are you carrying that you haven't admitted is so heavy? And that question, it really stopped me.
Wow, that's a powerful question. What was the answer?
No, honestly, too much. Not just one big thing, just too many little things, too many responsibilities, too many decisions, too many people needing something. And I realized something. None of those things by themselves were overwhelming, but together they had quietly filled every bit of my available space.
I think that's something people underestimate, honestly. And I think we often think burnout comes from just one catastrophic event, but most of the time it's just this huge accumulation of all these hundreds of tiny little stressors, all the emails, the hundreds of emails that are unanswered, the doctor's appointments that you need to schedule, the groceries, the bills, the family group text, the work deadlines, the friend that you forgot to call back. None of those things individually are huge, but your brain doesn't separate them the way that you think that it does. It just keeps adding them to the list.
And eventually your body starts waving little white flags. Maybe your digestion changes, or maybe you stop sleeping. Maybe your shoulders stay tight all day. Maybe you start crying over something that normally wouldn't even bother you. Maybe you lose your patience more quickly. Those aren't random, they're communication.
Can I ask you something, Amy?
Always.
When you finally recognized what was happening, did you immediately start to change things or did you still try to convince yourself you were fine?
Oh, I wish I could say I immediately listened, but no. My first response was, I just need to get through this week, which, if I'm honest, I've probably said that at least a million times in my life.
I think everyone listening just nodded because somehow this week turns into 3 months.
Exactly. And then one day you wake up wondering why you feel disconnected from yourself. It's not because one terrible thing happened, but because you ignored a thousand tiny whispers.
And from the science side, this makes perfect sense. See, your nervous system is constantly gathering information. It's not only responding to emergencies, it's responding to your sleep, your nutrition, your workload, your relationships, your environment, even how much decision making you're doing in a day. Your body just keeps score of all of it.
And spiritually, I think our bodies are incredibly wise. Some people ask me, how do I hear my intuition? And one of the first things I ask is, how often do you listen to your body? Because for many of us, intuition doesn't begin as a thought, it begins as a feeling. So it's a tightness or a heaviness or a sense of that something isn't aligned. But the challenge is we've become so practiced at talking ourselves out of what our body already knows.
I love that because science and spirituality are actually saying something very similar here. Your body is always communicating, and the question isn't whether it's speaking. The question is whether we've become quiet enough to actually hear it.
I keep thinking about something you said, that the body is constantly gathering information. I really don't think we give that enough credit.
No, we really don't. We've been taught to trust our thoughts above everything else. If we can explain something logically, we believe it. But our bodies are processing thousands of pieces of information every second that never reach our conscious awareness. That's why you can walk into a room and immediately think something feels off, even if you can't explain why. Your nervous system has already picked up on cues before your thinking brain catches up.
I love that because spiritually, we often call that intuition. And people ask me all the time, how do I know if it's intuition or if I'm just making it up? And I usually tell them intuition tends to arrive quietly, fear tends to arrive loud. Fear rushes you, but intuition, it invites you. Fear says, you have to decide right now. And intuition just says, pause and pay attention.
And that's actually a really interesting comparison because urgency is something we see with a dysregulated nervous system. So when you're stressed, everything feels like an emergency. The email, the phone call, the text message, the decision. Your brain starts treating everything with the same level of importance.
Which is exhausting.
It really is. And the hardest part is that after you've lived in that state long enough, it just starts to feel normal. You don't realize how much tension that you're carrying because you've just adapted to it.
Can we talk about people pleasing for a minute? Because
Yes.
I think this is where so many of us disconnect from our bodies.
Oh, I knew we were going there.
We have to. I mean, how many times has your body already answered the question before your mouth says, sure, I'd love to do it?
Way too many. Way too many. You know those moments where someone asks you to take on one more thing, and before you've even answered, your shoulders tense, your stomach drops, and you take this tiny little breath, almost like your body is saying, please don't. And then you hear yourself say yes anyway.
I think everyone just felt that because we've all done it. There have been times where I knew immediately that I didn't have the capacity, not because I didn't care and not because I didn't want to help, but because I already was stretched too thin. And instead of honoring that, I'd convince myself it's only one more thing, except it's never just one more thing.
Exactly. It's one more thing on top of 50 other things. People often ask why they feel so overwhelmed, and sometimes it's not because any one responsibility is impossible. It's because they never have given themselves permission to stop adding to their pile.
I actually had one of those moments not too long ago. Someone asked me to commit to something that honestly sounded wonderful. It aligned with my values. It was a great opportunity. Every logical reason said I should do it. My body immediately felt heavy. It wasn't scared. It just felt heavy. And I almost ignored it because I didn't have a good enough reason to say no.
And so, what did you end up doing?
I told him I needed 24 hours before I answered. And that was huge for me to say that because old Amy would have said yes right on the spot. Then I'd spend the next week figuring out how I was going to make it work. But instead, I waited and I slept on it. And the next morning, I checked with myself again, and the answer was still no. And it wasn't because it wasn't a good opportunity, because it was, but it was because it wasn't the right opportunity for that season.
I love that because remember this, everybody who's listening, saying no doesn't automatically mean something's wrong. Sometimes it just simply means your bandwidth is full. We don't question a phone battery when it needs a recharge, but somehow we expect ourselves to operate at 100% all the time.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great analogy. We're always concerned about our phone battery, right?
Right.
And honestly, if our phones gave us the same warning signs our bodies do, we'd plug it in immediately.
One thing I tell clients is this: your body isn't trying to sabotage you. I promise you that. It's trying to protect you. Stress responses develop to keep us alive. The problem is that modern life keeps activating those same responses over emails and deadlines and financial worries and overflowing calendars. So your body isn't broken. It's just responding exactly the way it was designed to.
And from the spiritual side, I think of our bodies as sacred messengers, not because every ache has some mystical meaning, but because our bodies are always inviting us into relationship with ourselves. So sometimes a headache is just a headache. And sometimes it's your body asking, when was the last time you drank water? Or when was the last time you rested? Or when was the last time you took a deep breath? Or when was the last time you did something just because it brought you joy? I think we spend so much time asking our bodies to perform that we forget to ask them what they need.
I love that distinction. Curiosity instead of criticism. Instead of saying, why is my body doing this to me? Maybe we should ask, what is my body trying to tell me? That one small shift changes the entire conversation.
Speaking of listening to your body, can I share something that's become a part of my morning routine?
Sure.
It's 5 minutes. That's it. Before I touch my phone, emails, before I look at my social media, I sit down quietly with one hand on my heart and one hand on my abdomen. And then I ask myself three questions. How am I feeling? What do I need today? And what can wait? And some mornings the answers come immediate. Other mornings, sometimes I just sit there in silence. But I've noticed something. The more I practice checking in, the less my body has to yell at me to get my attention.
I absolutely love that. And what's interesting is that practices like that can activate the parasympathetic nervous system and the part that's associated with rest and digestion and recovery. So you're slowing your breathing, you're directing your attention inward, you're creating a pause before the demands of the day rush in. And that's not avoiding life, that's actually preparing for it.
Exactly. It's not about escaping responsibility. It's about showing up from a regulated place instead of a depleted one. This conversation has me thinking about something I heard years ago. Someone said, "Your body keeps an honest journal." At the time, I thought, okay, that's interesting. But now I think there's so much truth in it because we can convince ourselves we're okay, but our body's usually telling us the truth.
I like that. And I think it's important to say that listening to your body doesn't mean assuming every symptom has one explanation. Our bodies are very complex. And sometimes something needs medical attention, sometimes it's stress, sometimes it's lack of sleep or dehydration or maybe food, hormones, nutrition, or any of the number of things. Listening to your body also means getting appropriate care when something doesn't feel right. It's never about ignoring symptoms or trying to explain everything through one lens.
I'm really glad you said that because I think there's wisdom in using every tool available to us. Science and spirituality aren't competing, they're partners. One helps us understand what's happening physically. The other helps us explore what we're experiencing emotionally and spiritually. And together, it gives us a fuller picture.
Exactly. One does not replace the other.
All right, let's jump into today's listener question. This one comes from Melissa in Colorado. Every time I try to set boundaries, I feel guilty, even when I know it's the right thing to do. How do I stop feeling like I'm letting everyone down? Melissa, first of all, you are definitely not alone.
Not even a little. I don't know anyone who's started setting healthy boundaries and thought, well, that was easy. There's usually discomfort, especially if you've spent years being the dependable one, the helper, the fixer, the person everyone calls.
Absolutely. And I think we often confuse guilt with doing something wrong. They're not always the same thing. Sometimes guilt is simply evidence that you're doing something different. If people have always had unlimited access to your time, your energy, and your attention, changing the relationship is going to feel uncomfortable for everyone involved.
And that is a huge important point. Your nervous system also likes familiarity. So when a pattern isn't healthy, it's predictable. So when you start saying no or asking for help or protecting your time, your brain may interpret that change as a threat simply because it's unfamiliar. So remember that. It doesn't mean you've made the wrong decision. It often means you're creating a new pattern.
I remember one of the first times I said no to something I normally would have agreed to. I replayed that conversation in my head for days. I wondered if they were upset, if I should call them back, if I should change my mind. And meanwhile, they'd probably moved on with their life. I was the only one that was carrying it.
Isn't that amazing? We spend so much energy imagining other people's reactions, and sometimes those reactions never even happen.
Right? Here's something that shifted my perspective. I used to think boundaries push people away. Now I think healthy boundaries actually make relationships more honest. When I'm constantly saying yes while secretly feeling overwhelmed, I'm really not being authentic. I'm just performing.
And that's a good way to put it because resentment will often grow where boundaries are missing. You say yes, then you're exhausted, then you feel resentful, then you feel guilty for feeling resentful. It's a little cycle.
Exactly. And eventually your body starts carrying emotions your voice never expressed.
And that's powerful. Your body often experiences what your words never say.
Write that one down. Seriously, though, I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've ever learned. Kindness doesn't require self abandonment. You can be compassionate and still have limits. You can love people and still protect your peace. Those things they can exist together. I wanted to share a practice that's become one of my favorites whenever I notice myself slipping back into yes mode. It's simply it's incredibly simple. I call it the pause before the promise. So whenever someone asks me for something, usually unless it's an emergency, I don't ever answer immediately. I simply say, "Thank you for thinking of me. Let me check my schedule and get back to you." That one sentence has changed so much for me because it gives me space to check in with myself instead of responding automatically.
I love that because you're interrupting an automatic habit. You're creating a moment where your thinking brain can then catch up instead of reacting from pressure or obligation or just that knee jerk reaction. Sometimes just taking that 10 seconds is enough to completely change your answer.
Exactly. And when I do check in, I ask myself three questions. Do I truly have the capacity? Because that's important. And am I saying yes because I want to or because I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint someone? And if nobody judged my answer, what would I choose? Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it's no. And you know what? Either answer is okay.
Yes, it is. All right. It's time for this week's home play. And this one is beautifully simple. At least once this week, before saying yes to a request, pause, take your slow breath, and then quietly ask yourself, what is my body telling me right now? And notice what happens. Don't judge it. Just notice.
Then spend 5 minutes at the end of the day journaling about what you discovered. Maybe your body felt relaxed. Maybe it felt tense. Maybe you noticed excitement. Maybe you noticed resistance. There's no right or wrong answer. The goal isn't to analyze yourself. The goal is to rebuild trust with yourself, one honest check in at a time.
And that wraps up this week's episode of Wholistic Wednesdays. Thank you for spending this time with us and allowing us to be part of your wellness journey.
Remember, your body isn't your enemy. It's not trying to make life harder. It's communicating with you every single day. The question isn't whether your body is speaking. The question is whether you're creating enough quiet to hear it.
If today's conversation resonated with you, we'd love for you to share this episode with someone who's been running on empty. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give another person is permission to slow down and listen.
And if you have a question you'd like us to answer in the future episode, send it our way. We love hearing from you, and your questions often inspire some of our favorite conversations. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Holistic_Wednesdays. That's holistic with a W, so you never miss an episode.
Until next Wednesday, honor your body.
Trust your intuition.
And keep shifting.
The views expressed on this podcast are for educational and entertainment purposes only and are not intended as medical or psychological advice. While we use hypnotherapy techniques, please never listen to the visualization portion of this show while driving or operating heavy machinery. Always consult a healthcare professional for your specific needs.